These are 15 documented design flaws in the human body, and every single one traces back to fish, reptiles, and apes that lived millions of years before us. This is the complete evolutionary history of why your body, by any engineering standard, qualifies as a mess. Nothing in you started from scratch. Your body is a 4 billion-year-old renovation project where no structure ever got demolished, only repurposed, and the consequences of that show up in hospitals every day. 619 million people worldwide suffered from low back pain in 2020 alone. Roughly 5,500 Americans choke to death every year on food their own throat failed to route correctly. 10 million wisdom teeth get ripped out annually in the United States, which means right now, someone is sitting in an oral surgeon's chair paying for a jaw that evolution shrank too fast. None of these are freak accidents, and all of them are predictable failures baked into anatomy that never got built for the life you are living now. The biggest failure came first: the spine. Somewhere around 6 million years ago, our ancestors started standing upright. By about 3.2 million years ago, our earliest known ancestors had already locked in walking upright as the default. The spine those ancestors inherited had spent hundreds of millions of years as a horizontal beam, perfectly suited for four-legged walking, and evolution's answer to going vertical involved bending that beam into an S-curve, stacking 33 vertebrae on top of each other with soft cartilage discs wedged between them. That arrangement makes for a terrible column. The pressure from standing and sitting drives those discs to bulge and rupture in ways that a four-legged animal simply never experiences, and the price tag shows up everywhere. Low back pain has held the title of leading cause of years lived with disability on Earth since 1990 and has not let go once. Depending on where you live and what you do, your chances of getting lower back pain fall between 60 and 90%, and projections push global numbers to 843 million people by 2050. No surgery fixes this, because the architecture itself is the problem. The nerve that took the wrong exit. You have a nerve called the recurrent laryngeal nerve, and its only job is to control your voice box, which sits in your throat, just centimeters from where the nerve starts in your brain. A straight route would cover almost no distance at all. What actually happens is that this nerve exits the brain, drops all the way down into your chest, loops underneath a major blood vessel right next to your heart, and then climbs all the way back up to the throat, adding about 10 to 12 centimeters of completely unnecessary cable. And that is the human version, which barely registers compared to the giraffe. The same nerve in a giraffe stretches approximately 4.6 meters long, about 15 feet, to reach a voice box that sits a few centimeters from its brain. The reason goes back 370 million years, to when the ancestor of this nerve ran a direct line from brain to gills in fish. As animals evolved necks and the heart moved deeper into the chest, it dragged the nerve down with it. No biological pathway exists to unhook it, which means every mammal alive carries this detour because of a body plan that made sense in a fish. Any engineer looking at this would reroute it in an afternoon. Evolution cannot do that. It can only modify what already exists, and what already existed was a fish. The choking problem. Your throat has another inherited defect, and this one kills thousands of people a year. Humans share a single intersection, the pharynx, where the food pipe and the air pipe cross each other. Most mammals avoid this entirely because a flap in their throat locks into the soft palate, creating separate channels for breathing and swallowing. Our species lost that separation when the voice box dropped lower in the throat during infancy and again at puberty, opening up space for the resonant, flexible speech that defines human communication. Speech came at a cost. 5,529 Americans died from choking in 2023, and that number climbed to 5,923 in 2024, making choking the fourth leading cause of unintentional injury death in the country. Your lifetime odds of dying from choking on food in the United States land at roughly 1 in 2,461. Japan's numbers paint an even darker picture, with over 8,000 people dying annually from food or objects lodged in the airway, ranking it the second leading cause of accidental death in that country. We traded safety for language. Language probably justified the bargain, but the plumbing behind it remains terrible. Wisdom teeth. Your jaw shrank, and your teeth did not keep up. Wisdom teeth trace back to ancestors who needed massive flat molars for grinding tough, fibrous plants. Agriculture arrived about 10,000 years ago, diets softened, and jaw size contracted faster than tooth size could follow, which left millions of people with molars that have nowhere to go. About 80% of young adults now carry at least one impacted wisdom tooth. Approximately 10 million wisdom teeth get extracted from about 5 million people in the US every year, and an estimated 11,000 people per year suffer permanent nerve damage from the extraction procedure itself. But here's where it gets interesting, because evolution is actively working on this one. Globally, about 22.6% of people never develop at least one wisdom tooth at all. The gene simply does not fire. Among Inuit populations, that number reaches 45%. Natural selection is slowly deleting the problem tooth by tooth, just not fast enough for anyone watching this to benefit. The knee. Evolution built the knee as a hinge, and then walking upright forced it to absorb twisting and shearing forces that a hinge was never tested against. The ACL, a short ligament inside the joint, has poor blood supply and essentially zero capacity to repair itself once torn. Between 200,000 and 250,000 ACL injuries strike Americans every year, and for females aged 14 to 18, the rate spikes to the highest of any demographic. That spike ties directly to another evolutionary compromise. The wider pelvis required for childbirth changes the angle at the knee and amplifies rotational stress. More than 670,000 total knee replacements happen annually in the US, and 1 in 2 Americans will develop chronic knee joint degeneration in at least one knee over their lifetime. Four-legged animals handle this joint fine. Running, upright, and a 70-year service life were never part of the original test conditions. Here is one of the cruelest trade-offs in human evolution. Walking upright narrowed the pelvis for efficient movement, while growing brains expanded the infant's skull to about 34 centimeters around, and those two pressures pull in opposite mechanical directions. 1.5%. That is the estimated death rate for mothers during childbirth without medical intervention. Obstructed labor occurs in 3 to 6% of all births and accounts for roughly 8 to 12% of maternal deaths worldwide. Human infants arrive neurologically unfinished compared to other primates, born during what some call the 4th trimester, essentially premature by primate standards, because waiting any longer would mean they could no longer fit through the canal. Every other primate gives birth comparatively easily. Humans nearly die from it, and the reason is that 2 of evolution's best ideas, big brains and upright walking, are in direct mechanical conflict with each other at the exit. The backward eye. The light-sensing cells in your eye, your rods and cones, face away from incoming light. Their wiring runs across the inner surface of the retina and converges at one spot, where it punches a hole through the retina to form the optic nerve. That hole creates your blind spot, covering about 5 degrees of visual field per eye, with no light-sensing cells at all. Octopus eyes developed independently from ours, and the octopus version got it right. Light-sensing cells in the octopus eye face the light directly, and the optic nerve exits behind the retina, which means no blind spot exists. Same engineering challenge, better outcome, arrived at through a completely separate evolutionary path. The backwards wiring in your eye makes retinal detachment more common in vertebrates than in octopuses and squid. Our layout locked in because of how the eye folds during embryonic development, and no pressure strong enough to rewire hundreds of millions of years of that pattern ever showed up. Evolution does not go back and redo the wiring. It just keeps building on top of whatever came before. A few more inherited problems deserve a quick pass. Starting with the appendix. Darwin dismissed it as useless in 1871, a leftover from ancestors with much larger digestive organs, built for breaking down raw plants. Research in 2007 showed that the appendix actually functions as a safe house for beneficial gut bacteria, storing a backup supply to repopulate your intestines after illness. That partial rehabilitation still leaves one ugly fact untouched. Because the appendix gets infected in about 7% of Americans over a lifetime and drives roughly 327,000 emergency removals per year. Sinuses, your largest sinus cavities, drain through an opening positioned high on the wall, a layout that worked perfectly when ancestors walked on 4 legs and gravity pulled fluid toward the exit. Standing upright flipped that geometry, and studies on cadavers confirmed that sinus drainage performed significantly better in the 4-legged head position than the upright one. Goosebumps. Goosebumps come from tiny muscles contracting to raise hair that barely exists anymore. a leftover from furred ancestors who trapped insulating air and puffed up to look bigger to predators, now reduced to a cosmetic reflex on nearly hairless skin. The testicles. The testes form inside the abdomen and travel through a canal to reach the outside, leaving a permanent gap in the abdominal wall. 800,000 hernia repairs happen in the United States every year because of that gap, and men face roughly 25 times the risk that women do. The prostate. Your prostate gland wraps entirely around the tube you urinate through, and as it enlarges with age, which it does in over 80% of men past 80, it strangles the tube it surrounds. No engineer would ever route a pipe through the center of a gland that never stops growing. And then there is the gulo gene. Most mammals manufacture their own vitamin C internally. Your version of the gene responsible sits broken on chromosome 8, and it stopped working in our primate ancestors roughly 50 to 65 million years ago. Without vitamin C from food, scurvy sets in. Between 1500 and 1800, that single broken gene killed an estimated 2 million sailors. Every great ape and most monkeys carry the same dead gene, a fossil of lost capability written into your DNA. None of these features count as outright failures, because each one worked well enough for survival and reproduction, which is the only metric evolution cares about. But well enough and well designed describe two very different things. What you are carrying around is a 375 million-year-old fish plan, modified for land, then modified for trees, then modified again for walking upright, and now expected to sit in an office chair for 8 hours and last until 80. Every flaw on this list, the backward eye, the looping nerve, the narrow pelvis, the broken vitamin gene, traces directly back to ancestry rather than planning. Imperfect design is the mark of evolution. Your body is not evidence of a blueprint. It is evidence of a history.